This is a top one that I built in 10 hours, containing tough UFO gaps, an impossible wave, and tight cube jumps. But before I get to that, I'm gonna start by making a top one in just 10 seconds. Oh, okay, first things first, I'm gonna go immediately into a ship. We're gonna zoom out, and then we just want saws, I think, like this. Okay, that's 10 seconds. Hopefully it's at least playable. I mean, it's something. This 10-second top one is definitely interesting, but I'm hoping I can do a lot more with 1 minute. Okay, I think something cool to do would be wave, and we just gotta copy and paste some sort of saw pattern. Something like that, why not? Something like this so you can't escape. And now we just copy and paste this. We got like 5 seconds. Okay, this is a 20-second long level. Let's see how it turns out. And I feel like I did all right, all things considered. This one was better than the last one. This 1 minute top one was all right, but I know with 10 minutes I can do a lot more. I started by picking a song. Let's go with Hexagon Force before making some ship gameplay with these frame perfect gaps. I then copy and pasted these structures around and then started thinking about how I could make the worst top one gameplay possible. We can put like little orbs that you have to avoid. Kind of like the one part in Fire. I was copy and pasting a bunch. I added the saw gap and then I copy and pasted some more before moving on to the next part, which was a wave, which I started off by making this spike gap and this slope gap before copy and pasting like my life depended on. Which brings us to our final part, which is a cube. However, when I realized how low the time was running, I knew I just had to scramble to make something. I'm just gonna copy and paste this. And after finishing up this gameplay, I wanted to do one last thing. Let's just think of decoration. Background black, ground black. I have a brilliant idea. And this final idea was the last thing I got the chance to do. 30 seconds. I actually got like somewhat of a layout through. Let's see how this is. And after playing this level, I didn't have much to say about it. This is a level for the ages for sure, but I know I can definitely do a lot more with 1 hour. The 10-minute top one was questionable, but now that I have 1 hour, I'll be able to do a lot more. Let's start, get a song going. I think I want to go like Electroman Adventure. I decided to start this level off with a ship, where I placed some saws and came up with this green color scheme. I then made some questionable ship gameplay before realizing how much time I was actually wasting. I need to keep checking if this is possible or not. Okay, I've already burned through 6 minutes, so we're not on the best pace of all time. So I unleashed my inner copy and paste demon to make up some time. And this is when I came up with a strategy on how to spend the rest of my hour. My goal is to start actually building the decoration 30 minutes in. And I was on track to meet this goal, as not long after I started working on the next part, which was a wave. Which I started with an impossible timing, followed by more impossible timings, and believe it or not, even more impossible timings. Since I knew I was gonna copy and paste this gameplay anyways, I just left it until I decorated it so I could copy and paste it then. I then started working on the next part, which was a UFO, where I utilized the same strategy as the last few parts, which was a bunch of spikes, a bunch of saws, and a bunch of copy and paste. And before I knew it, I was fully done the gameplay. Okay, 28 minutes, we're cutting it close. I immediately started decorating the background by using the smog block, which I then scaled up a bunch and copy and pasted everywhere, before layering the smog with another smog block, which I also scaled and copy and pasted around. I then added all the smog to a new group before coloring it a very subtle green. I then copy and pasted the background throughout the entire level before making it move opposite to the player, giving us a pretty cool effect. However, I still wanted to add more layers to the background, so I took this industrial block, made it green, scaled it up, and copy and pasted it around. I then made it move away from the player, and with that, I was done the background. Shortly after, I started working on the foreground by making this glow block that actually looked pretty good. I then started decorating all the saws in the level in the most creative way possible, which was using a lot, and I mean a lot, of glow. And before I knew it, there was less than 15 minutes left, which meant I had to decorate the spikes, blocks, and finish the wave with the rest of this time. I am so cooked. I started the block decoration by scaling this block up, copy and pasting it around, and then putting it on top of some blocks. I then made some variants of this design and then copy and pasted it to every block. I then moved on to the spike design, which I kept very simple. I made this bright green glow and copy and pasted it to every single spike in the level. Once I also finished the block and spike design for the wave, I copy and pasted it through the rest of the part. Which brings us to our final UFO part, where I continue to copy and paste all my designs throughout the rest of the level. And after scaling up these spike objects, adding them to the foreground, and copy and pasting them throughout the entire level, I realized that my 1 hour was finally up. Okay, and that is time. And after playing through this level with no hacks, I felt pretty proud of what I built, but I know with 10 hours, I will be able to make a top one that is incredible. Let's get straight into it. I started by picking Clutterfunk as the song, and then began working on some UFO gameplay to start. And even though I was taking my time building, I still made sure to keep up the pace. Now, I don't want to go too crazy, because what if 10 hours isn't enough time, you know? Despite this, I made sure to spend enough time on gameplay to the point where I didn't have to copy and paste as much. And after nearly 30 minutes into my 10 hours, I was moving on to the next part, which was a cube, where I made sure to keep enforcing the theme of top ones. First jump, obviously it's gonna be impossible. And just like the UFO part, I spent about 30 minutes just grinding, trying to make some tough and very interesting gameplay. I then moved on to the next part, which was this ship right before the drop, which ended up consisting of some pretty brutal time. And before actually building the drop, I decided to playtest for a little bit, which took around 20 minutes. And when I returned to actually work on the drop, I started making some of the most evil gameplay I've ever seen in this game. After realizing how torturous I made this wave, I knew I had to chill out on the next part, which was a mini cube that I drew a lot of inspiration from Boomba Womba. I mean, look at the Boomba Womba cube versus my cube. I feel like I kinda cooked. Anyways, after this cube, I moved on to a UFO part, which I also kept pretty simple. However, it wouldn't take long before I started making some more evil gameplay, because it was in this part I decided to add horrible dash orbs, incredibly tight gaps, and disgusting timing. Thankfully, however, this was the end of the level, which I ended with a straight fly into a quadruple spike. And after playtesting for a little bit, I knew it was time for the part that I was dreading. If you can tell from the last few top ones, I suck at decorating. However, I had more of a strategy going into the 10-hour top one than I did for the previous challenges. I decided to go with the modern decoration style, and to learn how to do this style, I pulled up a few YouTube tutorials. I started by filling all the structures in the first UFO part with solid black blocks. I then added this massive glow object in the foreground, before utilizing this tutorial to make my background, which starts by making this large arrow-shaped block, which I then copy and paste fully in one direction, before selecting everything, copy and pasting it, and flipping it around. I then add both sets of arrows to different grooves, which I follow up by making both sets of arrows move in different directions. And after adding some color pulses, we end up getting this pretty cool effect. I then started working on the foreground of this part using these slopes, which I copy and pasted around before adding color pulses, which gave us this pretty cool final result. I then finished off this part by adding these black circles behind every saw to make the saws completely black, which brings us to the next part, where I start off the same by making every block completely black. But this time I'm going to switch up the background by making this circle, which I split into quarters to make this shape, where I then copy and paste everything around until I get something like this. I then pulse and move accordingly to give us an awesome background. I then add some glow and some foreground to finish off the part. And after this part, I switch up the pace of the level, as I made sure to start off this ship pretty dark before we go into the drop, by utilizing black glow, a dark background, and white block. I also kept the background simple, making these gray pillars and putting them in the background. And this brings us to the halfway point of our 10 hours, which is where I started decorating the drop wave, where I made a background using these squiggly lines, which I moved and pulsed accordingly to get this result. I then added some foreground glow before spending 40 minutes filling every single wave structure with white solid blocks. And to finish off the wave part, I added the same foreground as the first few parts, where I also added an extra layer in the back just for some more depth. And then it was time for the final stretch of decoration, where I started by decorating the background with the same exact background from the first UFO. I also made sure to keep the surrounding black glow from previous parts to maintain that dark theme. And for one last time, I filled every structure with these solid blocks. And then to truly finish the level, I replaced every saw with these saws and put these blocks in the foreground of the very last part. Everything looks all good. I just gotta patch up a couple things, fix some secret ways. And after spending nearly 30 minutes to playtest everything to make sure everything was okay, with 2 hours to spare, I was done the 10-hour top one. And this was the final result. Alright, I guess that's everything. Subscribe.